The old alien soldier sat in a dark room. His name was Vectar, and he was very old. His skin looked like armor made of thick plates. Scars covered his body from many battles, but none of those battles scared him like the one he was about to talk about. The recording machine sat on the table in front of him. Its red light blinked, waiting. Vectar's 4 eyes looked at the machine, then looked away. His hands shook a little. "You want me to tell you about that day," he said slowly. His voice was rough like broken glass. "The day everything changed. The day we learned to be afraid." He stopped talking and listened to the quiet. Outside this room, millions of aliens lived and worked in the great space station. They did not know what he was about to say. They did not remember the terror. "I was a soldier for the Kethran Empire," Vectar said. "We ruled half the galaxy. We had the biggest ships. We had the strongest weapons. We thought no one could stop us." His claws clicked on the metal table. Click, click, click. "We were wrong." Vectar stood up and walked to the big window. Outside, space stretched forever. Stars twinkled like tiny diamonds. Ships moved between the planets like flying dots. "The war had been going on for 3 years," he said, still looking out the window. "The Third Spiral War, we called it. Every big empire was fighting. The Kethran Empire, the Zephyr Star Kingdom, the Robot Collective. We were fighting over planets, over trade routes, over who would rule the galaxy." He turned back to face the recording machine. "Billions died. Whole planets burned. We destroyed star systems just to prove our power. It was the biggest war in galactic history." Vectar sat down again. His old body creaked like an old door. "But we never thought about the small species. The weak ones. There were thousands of them scattered across the galaxy. Most lived on just 1 or 2 planets. They had no big armies. They had no superweapons. We ignored them." His eyes got darker. "That was our first mistake." The old soldier reached for a cup of water. His hand still shook. He drank slowly, then continued. "There was one species we laughed at the most. They lived on a small blue planet in a corner of the galaxy nobody cared about. They called themselves humans. They had sent messages asking for peace. They wanted to join the Galactic Council. They wanted protection for their few colonies." Vectar made a sound that might have been a laugh, but it held no joy. "We thought they were funny. Cute, even. They were so small, so weak. Their fastest ships were slower than our cargo vessels. Their weapons were like toys compared to ours. They had maybe 20 planets while we had thousands." He leaned forward, his voice getting quieter. The council meetings about humans always ended the same way. Everyone would laugh. "Let them play at being space travelers," they would say. "They will destroy themselves soon enough. All primitive species do." The red light on the recording machine kept blinking, waiting. But there was something different about the humans. They never stopped asking for peace. When we destroyed their trade ships, they sent messages asking why. When we bombed their colonies, they asked what they had done wrong. When we killed their people, they asked if we could talk instead of fight. Vectar's voice got very quiet now. We should have listened to what they were really saying. We should have heard the warning in their words. He stood up again and walked to a different wall. On this wall were pictures, images from the Great War. Ships exploding, planets burning, the faces of alien soldiers who had died. "I was there when everything changed," he said to the pictures. "I was a commander in the Kethran Third Fleet. We had just finished destroying a human colony called New Hope. Such a stupid name for a planet. Hope. What good is hope when you are dying?" His reflection looked back at him from the dark window. "We thought we had won. The human colony was glass and ash. Their few defense ships were space dust. We were celebrating. Admiral Krexvor was already planning which human world we would attack next." Vectar turned back to the recording machine. His 4 eyes were wide now, remembering. That is when they came. The room got very quiet. Even the air seemed to stop moving. The sensors started screaming. Space itself was tearing open. Something big was coming through hyperspace. Something impossible. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "At first we thought it was another empire trying to steal our victory. Maybe the Zephyrians wanted the human worlds for themselves. Our weapons powered up. We prepared to fight." Vectar sat down heavily in his chair. "Then we saw the ship." He closed his eyes, but the memory was still there. It would always be there. It was not like anything we had ever seen. 12 kilometers long, made of metal that seemed to eat light, covered in weapons we did not recognize. It moved through space like a hunting animal, slow and careful and deadly. His hands gripped the arms of his chair. But it was not just the ship that scared us. It was what we felt when we looked at it. This ship was not built for conquest. It was not built for glory or profit or power. It was built for one thing only. He opened his eyes and looked directly at the recording machine. It was built to end things. Vektar reached for his water again, but his hands were shaking too much. He put the cup down. The human ship hung in space like a storm cloud full of lightning. We could not move. We could not speak. 3,000 Kethron warships, and we were frozen like frightened children. His voice got stronger now, like he was angry at the memory. Then more ships came, dozens, hundreds, each one different but all carrying the same terrible purpose. They appeared from hyperspace in perfect formation, like they had practiced this moment for years. Vektar stood up one more time. This time he walked to the center of the room. Admiral Krexford tried to demand their surrender. Can you believe that? He still thought we were the strong ones. He still thought humans were weak. The old soldier looked up at the ceiling as if he could see through the metal and into space itself. That is when the human commander spoke. His voice came over every communication channel, calm, cold, like winter wind. Vektar's voice changed, becoming deeper, trying to copy what he had heard that day. You have made a mistake, the human said. You thought mercy was weakness. You thought our desire for peace meant we could not fight. You were wrong. The old alien's body shivered. Then he said something that still haunts my dreams. Something that changed everything we thought we knew about war, about power, about what it means to be strong. Vektar looked directly at the recording machine one last time. His 4 eyes burned with the memory of that moment when the galaxy learned a new kind of fear. He said, when hope takes the field, when a species learns that some things are worth dying for, the galaxy itself holds its breath. The recording machine kept blinking, waiting for the rest of the story. But Vektar was quiet now, lost in the memory of the day everything changed, the day humanity showed the galaxy what real power looked like. Outside the window, the stars continued to shine. But they seemed different now, colder, more distant, as if they too remembered what happened when humanity finally went to war. 18 months before the Great Battle, the Galactic Council building was huge. It floated in space like a metal moon, bigger than most planets. Inside, aliens from 300 different worlds sat in a giant round room. They had come to talk about important things, wars, trade, new laws. Today they were laughing. High Counselor Vrexith was the leader of the Kethran Empire. He had 4 arms and skin like black metal. His voice was loud and mean when he spoke. Why are we wasting time on these humans, he said, waving his arms. They have 17 planets. We have thousands. Their ships are slow. Their weapons are weak. Why do we care what they want? The other aliens laughed. The sound filled the huge room like poison gas. In a small section marked Lesser Species, 5 humans sat quietly. They wore simple blue uniforms. They did not laugh. They did not speak. They just watched. The leader of the humans was named Jinha. He was older, with gray hair and deep lines on his face. His eyes were dark and calm like deep water. Next to him sat Harin, a younger woman with sharp eyes and quick hands. On his other side was Quan, a big man who never smiled. Ambassador Jinha had asked to speak to the council many times. Each time they had made him wait. Each time they had laughed at his requests. Perhaps we should give them a few empty planets in the outer rim, said a tall alien made of living crystal. His name was Zephyr, and he ruled the Zephyr Star Kingdom. Let them play at being important until they kill themselves. All primitive species do that eventually. More laughter. Always more laughter. Jinha stood up slowly. When he moved, the laughter began to die. There was something about the way he stood, straight and proud and unafraid, that made the aliens pay attention. Honored counselors, Jinha said. His voice was quiet, but it carried across the huge room. We ask for nothing but what is fair. We want recognition. We want protection under galactic law. We want peace. High Counselor Vrexith's compound eyes glittered with cruel humor. Peace? From a species that has spent its whole history fighting itself? Your people have turned war into an art form, little human. Maybe that is all you are good for. The aliens laughed again, louder this time. Some of them pointed at the humans. Some made jokes in alien languages that sounded like grinding metal, but Jinha did not move. He stood like a mountain in a storm, unmoved by their mockery. You are wrong about us, Counselor, he said quietly. We are not a species that wants war. We are a species that ends them. The laughter stopped. In the silence that followed, Harin touched her wrist device very carefully. The signal she sent traveled faster than light, jumping across space to reach Earth's solar system. Far from the council chambers, in the hidden shipyards around Jupiter, 3 humans received Harin's message. Each one read the same words. They refused to listen. Proceed with Operation Prometheus. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of a ship called the Defiance. The ship was sleek and fast, built for speed and fighting. Jake was not tall, but his presence filled the room. Scars covered his hands from old battles. His eyes were the color of winter storms. So they think we're only good for war, Jake said to his crew. Maybe it's time we showed them what we learned to be good at. His officers nodded. They had all volunteered for this mission. They all knew they might not see home again. 200 kilometers away, Captain Lisa Park read the same message aboard a much larger ship called the Unbreakable. This ship was built like a flying fortress, covered in weapons and armor. Lisa was small and quiet, but when she smiled it was like watching lightning. Signal all department heads, she told her crew. Full combat readiness. It's time. But the most important message went to Commander Rex. He stood in the deepest part of the Jupiter shipyards in a construction base so large it could hold a small moon. Around him, thousands of workers were putting the finishing touches on humanity's greatest creation. The ship before him was beautiful in a terrible way. 12 kilometers of death and destruction, wrapped in armor that could stop planet-killer weapons. Every line of its hull spoke of violence raised to an art form. Rex was not a large man, but everyone who met him felt afraid without knowing why. They called him the Reaper of Titan because of what he had done during the Robot Wars. His hair was black with streaks of silver. His eyes were pale blue like Arctic ice. Next to him stood Sarah Chen, his chief engineer. She was brilliant and cold, the kind of person who could calculate exactly how much force was needed to crack a planet in half. The weapon systems are ready, Sarah reported, reading from her holographic display. All primary batteries show full charge. The quantum singularity cannon is operational. Rex nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving the massive ship. How long until the council makes their decision about our petition? Intelligence reports they will vote tomorrow, Sarah said. They plan to reject our request for recognition. Of course they do. Rex's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of winter. Signal Fleet Command. Tell them to prepare all vessels for immediate hyperspace jump. Sarah's fingers danced over her control panel, sending coded messages to hidden bases throughout the solar system. In secret shipyards around Mars, Europa, and Titan, human warships began to power up their engines. Each ship was different. Some were small and fast like the Defiance. Others were huge and strong like the Unbreakable. But they all shared one thing. They were built by a species that had spent its entire history learning to fight. Ma'am, a young officer called out to Sarah. We're receiving reports from all fleet elements. 300 ships are ready for jump. 300 ships. Each one crewed by volunteers. Each one carrying weapons that could shatter moons. Each one ready to show the galaxy what humanity had learned during its long, violent history. Rex walked to a viewing port and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Galactic Council was laughing at humanity's request for peace. They thought humans were weak because they asked for protection instead of taking it. They're about to learn something. Important, Rex said to Sarah. There's a difference between choosing peace and being unable to fight. Sarah nodded. Her own eyes were hard as diamonds. The difference is what happens when someone forces your hand. Back at the Galactic Council, the session was ending. The aliens had voted as expected. Humanity's petition for recognition was rejected. Their request for protection was denied. Their plea for peace was ignored. High Counselor Vrexith stood up. His forearms spread wide in a gesture of dismissal. Let the record show that the species known as humans has been denied membership in the Galactic Council, he announced. They may continue to exist in their small corner of space, but they will receive no protection, no recognition, and no respect. The aliens cheered. They had put the humans in their place. They had shown them who really ruled the galaxy. Jinha stood up one more time. The aliens expected him to beg, to plead, to ask them to reconsider. Instead, he smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the kind of smile a person makes when they know something others do not, when they have a secret that will change everything. Thank you, counselors, Jinha said politely. You have made your position very clear. Now we will make ours clear as well. He touched his wrist device. Another signal, this one different from the first. Across the galaxy, human ships began to move, not toward Earth, but toward the front lines of the Great War, toward the battles where the big empires were fighting each other, toward the place where humanity would announce its arrival on the galactic stage. Counselors, Jinha said as he and his delegation prepared to leave, you have taught us something valuable today. You have taught us that in this galaxy, respect is not given, it is taken. He paused at the door and looked back at the assembled aliens. We are fast learners. The humans left the council chamber. Behind them, the aliens continued to laugh and celebrate. They had no idea that everything was about to change. In the dark between stars, human warships were already jumping to hyperspace, carrying with them a message the galaxy would never forget. Humanity was no longer asking for peace. They were about to demand it. His voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more threat than any shout. You should have listened. Because when hope takes the field, when a species learns what is truly worth fighting for, the space around the human fleet seemed to hold its breath. The galaxy itself holds its breath. The Battle of the Crimson Nebula. The day everything changed high. Admiral Krexvor stood on the bridge of his flagship like a king on his throne. Through the big windows he could see his war fleet spread across space like a cloud of metal death. 3,000 ships, the pride of the Kethran Empire. Below them, the human colony on Kepler 442b was dying. For 6 hours, Krexvor's fleet had been bombing the planet. Their plasma cannons turned cities into glass. Their missiles turned mountains into dust. The few human fighters that tried to stop them were crushed like insects. Sir, his weapons officer called out. The main human city has fallen. Resistance is almost gone. Krexvor's compound eyes glittered with pleasure. Excellent. These humans thought they could ignore our warnings. They thought their pathetic peace treaties would protect them. He turned to face his officers. All of them were celebrating the easy victory. Signal the fleet, Krexvor ordered. Prepare to move to the next human world. We will burn them all until they learn to stay in their place. The bridge crew cheered. This was what they lived for, showing weaker species who really ruled the galaxy. But then something changed. Sir, the sensor officer's voice was sharp with worry. I'm detecting massive energy readings at the edge of the system. Something big is coming out of hyperspace. Krexvor barely looked at the readings. He was too busy planning his next attack. Another human transport ship, he said with a wave of his hand, running away like cowards. Let them come, we will destroy them too. But the energy readings kept growing, stronger and stronger until the ship's sensors started screaming warnings. Space began to twist and tear like fabric being ripped apart. Colors that had no names painted the darkness. Reality itself seemed to scream. Then it happened. A ship emerged from hyperspace. But this was not a human transport. This was not a refugee vessel fleeing the battle. This was the Eternal Fury. The ship was 12 kilometers of death wrapped in metal that seemed to eat light itself. Every line of its hull spoke of violence raised to an art form. Weapons covered its surface like scales on a dragon. It moved through space like a hunting cat, slow, careful, and absolutely deadly. On the bridge of Krexvor's flagship, the celebration died instantly. The Kethran officers stared at their screens in shock. Their sensors were telling them impossible things about this ship's power levels. What is that? Krexvor whispered. Before anyone could answer, space began tearing apart again. More ships appeared. Human ships. Dozens of them, then hundreds, each one materializing in perfect formation like they had practiced this moment for years. Sleek destroyers appeared next to massive battleships. Fast attack craft took positions alongside carrier vessels heavy with fighter squadrons. Each ship was different, but they all shared the same deadly purpose. The Kethran sensors went crazy trying to count them all. 50 ships. 100. 200. They kept coming, appearing from hyperspace with the precision of a military drill performed by masters. Impossible, Krexvor breathed. Our intelligence said the humans had no major fleet. Where did all these ships come from? On the bridge of the Eternal Fury, Commander Rex stood perfectly still. His pale blue eyes studied the enemy fleet through the main display. Around him, his crew worked with the quiet efficiency of people who had trained their entire lives for this moment. Rex was not a large man, but everyone on the bridge could feel his presence like a storm about to break. They called him the Reaper of Titan for good reason. When Rex went to war, entire worlds learned to be afraid. "Ma'am," the communications officer said to Sarah Chen, who stood at the tactical station. "We're receiving a transmission from the Kethron flagship. They're demanding our surrender." Sarah's laugh was sharp as breaking glass. She was small and brilliant with eyes like winter. "Open a channel." The main screen lit up, showing High Admiral Krexvor in all his arrogant glory. His forearms spread wide in a gesture of command. "Human vessels," Krexvor said, his voice full of cruel confidence. "You face the might of the Kethron Third Fleet. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick." Rex stepped forward. Something about the way he moved, like a predator sizing up its prey, made Krexvor's compound eyes narrow with sudden worry. "Admiral," Rex said, his voice calm as winter wind, "you have made two very big mistakes today." "And what might those be, Primitive?" Krexvor sneered, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. Rex smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the kind of smile that said someone was about to learn a very hard lesson. "First," Rex said quietly, "you thought we came alone." As if his words were magic, space began to tear again. More portals opened and more human ships poured through. The formation grew larger and larger, until the Kethron fleet was outnumbered 2-1. Advanced destroyers took flanking positions. Massive dreadnoughts formed the battle line. Carrier ships released clouds of fighters that moved like schools of deadly fish. Each ship was a masterpiece of human engineering, built with one purpose in mind: to win wars. "Impossible," Krexvor shouted. "Our spies reported no major fleet construction. How do you have so many ships?" Rex's smile grew wider and colder. "That was your second mistake, Admiral. You believed your spies." Throughout the human fleet, weapon systems came online with perfect coordination. Targeting computers locked onto Kethron ships. Energy readings climbed toward critical levels. The space between the two fleets crackled with tension like the air before a lightning storm. "You see, Admiral," Rex continued, his voice carrying across all communication channels, "you made the same mistake everyone makes about humans. You thought we were weak because we asked for peace. You thought mercy meant we could not fight. You were wrong." On the bridge of the destroyer Valkyrie's Wrath, Captain Lisa Park watched her tactical display fill with enemy targets. She was small and quiet, but when she smiled, it was like watching lightning prepare to strike. "All weapon systems are ready, Captain," her tactical officer reported. "Good," Lisa said softly. "It's time to show them what we learned during our long, violent history." Back on the Eternal Fury, Rex opened a channel to the entire human fleet. His voice reached every ship, every crew member, every person who had volunteered for this mission knowing they might not see home again. "All vessels," Rex said. "Today we write a new page in human history. Today we show the galaxy what happens when you mistake our desire for peace as an inability to wage war." Throughout the fleet, final preparations were made. Weapons charged to full power. Shields came online. Fighters launched from carrier bays like angry wasps. "They burned our cities," Rex continued, his voice growing colder with each word. "They killed our people. They laughed at our pleas for peace. They thought we were weak." He paused, and in that silence, the weight of human determination filled the void. "Show them," Rex whispered, but somehow his voice carried across space itself. Why the galaxy learned to fear the dark between stars. High Admiral Krexvor stared at his tactical display in growing horror. The human fleet was not just large, it was perfectly coordinated. Each ship knew exactly where to be, exactly what to do. This was not a hastily assembled force. This was a military machine that had been preparing for war while pretending to want peace. "All ships," Krexvor screamed into his communicator. "Attack, destroy them all." The Kethron fleet opened fire with everything they had. Plasma cannons that could melt continents lit up the darkness. Missiles that could crack moons streaked across space. The void between the fleets became a storm of deadly energy. But the human ships moved through the attack like ghosts, their advanced shielding and incredible speed allowing them to flow between killing blows like water through fingers. And for every shot they avoided, they returned 10. Rex watched the battle begin through the main display. His tactical officers called out damage reports and targeting solutions with machine-like precision. Around him, his crew worked with the calm efficiency of people who had trained for this moment their entire lives. "Signal all ships," Rex ordered. "Close formation. Show them what concentrated firepower really means. The human fleet began to move. Ships that had been spread across space started to contract, forming a formation that had never been tried in real combat. It required perfect trust, perfect timing, and the kind of coordination that could only come from a species that had learned to fight as one. As the ships moved into position, something changed in the battle. The scattered human attacks became focused beams of destruction. Where one human ship might struggle against a Kethron dreadnought, 10 ships working together could reduce the same target to vapor in seconds. High Admiral Krexvor watched his fleet begin to die. These humans were not fighting like any species he had ever seen. They fought with a desperation that had been refined into an art form more deadly than any weapon. "This is impossible," he screamed. "They're primitives. They can't be doing this." But they were. And as more Kethron ships exploded into balls of fire, as the proud Third Fleet began to fall apart under humanity's coordinated assault, one truth became clear to every alien in the battle. The galaxy had seriously underestimated the human race. Rex's voice carried across all frequencies, calm and deadly as judgment itself. "This is Commander Rex of the United Earth Federation. We tried to ask nicely. We tried to follow your laws. We tried to make peace." The Battle of the Crimson Nebula. Hour 1 war exploded across space like the birth of a new star. The human fleet opened fire with weapons that painted the darkness in colors that had no names. Quantum torpedoes streaked through space like fallen angels. Plasma beams cut through the void like swords of light. Where human weapons hit Kethron shields, reality itself seemed to bend and scream. High Admiral Krexvor watched his tactical display in growing terror. These were not the simple weapons his spies had reported. These were instruments of destruction built by a species that had turned war into an art form. "Return fire," he screamed at his crew. "All batteries! Destroy them!" The Kethron fleet responded with everything they had. Plasma bombardment platforms that could melt continents unleashed their fury. Missile batteries that could crack moons fired salvo after salvo. The space between the fleets became a storm of energy and death. But the human ships moved through the attack like dancers in a deadly ballet. Their shields absorbed hits that should have destroyed them. Their speed let them flow between enemy weapons like water through stones, and for every shot they avoided, they returned 10 times the firepower. On the bridge of the Defiance, Commander Jake Morrison gripped his command chair as his ship shook under enemy fire. The Defiance was smaller than the big dreadnoughts, built for speed and surgical strikes. But in Jake's hands it became something far more dangerous, a scalpel wielded by a master surgeon. "Take us into their formation," Jake ordered his helmsman. His voice was calm despite the chaos around them. "Time to show them what close combat really means." The young woman at the helm, her hands steady despite her fear, sent the Defiance diving toward the heart of the enemy fleet. Around them, space burned with the fury of gods at war. "Sir," his weapons officer called out, "I'm detecting a massive energy buildup from their flagship. They're charging some kind of planet-killer weapon." Jake's scarred face went hard as stone. That weapon had been the one destroying the human colony below. In its firing chamber was enough power to crack a moon in half. "New target," he said quietly. "Everything we have, fire!" The Defiance screamed its fury across the void. Every weapon on the ship fired at once. Quantum cannons, torpedo launchers, particle beams. The combined barrage struck the Kethron flagship's weapon array, just as it reached full charge. The explosion that followed lit up the entire nebula like a newborn star. The flagship's planet-killer weapon died in a ball of fire that could be seen from 3 star systems away. But the humans paid a price for their bold attack. As Jake's ship pulled away from the fireball, enemy fighters swarmed around it like angry wasps. Plasma bolts hammered the Defiance's shields, sending cascading failures through the power systems. "Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12, his damage control officer reported, her voice steady despite the emergency sirens. "We're losing air. Engines are down to 30%. Jake felt the deck shake beneath his feet as another enemy salvo found its mark. Through the tactical display, he could see the larger battle raging around them. Human ships fighting with impossible courage against overwhelming odds, trading their lives for strategic advantage. "All hands," Jake said into the ship's communication system, his voice calm despite the chaos. "This is the captain. We knew when we left Earth that we might not come home. We knew the odds. We came anyway." Another impact. The lights flickered and went out for a moment. We came because someone has to stand between the darkness and everything we love. We came because that's what humans do. We stand up when others fall down. On the bridge of the massive carrier Unbreakable, Captain Lisa Park watched her fighter squadrons engage the enemy. Her ship was built like a flying fortress covered in armor and weapons, but her real power was the cloud of small fighters that poured from her launch bays like angry bees. Squadron 7 is taking heavy casualties, her flight control officer reported. Should I order them to pull back? Lisa's small frame was perfectly still as she studied the tactical display. Her fighters were outnumbered 3-1, but they were fighting with a skill and determination that amazed even their enemies. Negative, she said softly. All squadrons continue attack. Show them what human pilots can do. Her fighters responded by diving deeper into the enemy formation, their weapons blazing. Each pilot knew they were probably going to die, but they also knew that their sacrifice would save the colony below, would protect Earth, would show the galaxy that humans were not weak. In the center of the battle, the massive dreadnought Eternal Fury stood like a mountain in a storm. Commander Rex watched the tactical display with the cold focus of a chess master. Around him, his crew worked with machine precision even as the ship shook under enemy fire. Ma'am, the communications officer said to Sarah Chen, the Defiance is requesting permission for Protocol 7. Sarah's face went pale. Protocol 7 was a ramming attack, a death sentence for the ship and crew that carried it out. Denied, Rex said firmly before Sarah could respond. Signal all vessels in close formation. We're going to show them what real firepower looks like. The human fleet began to move with ballet-like precision. Ships that had been spread across space started to come together, forming a formation that required absolute trust between crews. It was a maneuver that had never been tried in real combat. As the ships moved into position, something amazing happened. Their combined firepower began to focus on individual targets with devastating effect. Where a single human ship might struggle against a Kethran dreadnought, 10 ships working together could turn the same target into space dust in seconds. High Admiral Krexvor watched his fleet die with growing panic. These humans fought like no species he had ever seen. They fought with a fury that came from defending everything they held dear. They fought like people who had nothing left to lose and everything to protect. All ships, he transmitted, his voice cracking with fear, converge on the human flagship. If we can destroy their command ship, his words were cut off as the Eternal Fury showed why humanity had named her well. Her main weapon, a quantum singularity cannon that pushed the very limits of what physics would allow, fired once. The beam that erupted from her bow was not just light or energy. It was weaponized space and time itself, a focused distortion that reached across the void and touched Krexvor's flagship with the gentleness of absolute destruction. The Kethran flagship didn't just explode. It folded in on itself like origami made of steel and fire, then vanished into quantum foam. 3,000 crew members simply stopped existing. Krexvor had just enough time to scream before he and his ship became nothing more than scattered atoms drifting in space. The death of their admiral sent shockwaves of panic through the Kethran fleet. Some ships tried to run toward the edge of the system. Others made desperate attacks that accomplished nothing but their own destruction. The proud Third Fleet began to fall apart like a house of cards in a hurricane, but the humans did not chase the fleeing ships. They held their position, weapons trained on the survivors, and waited. Rex's voice carried across all communication frequencies, calm and implacable as the voice of judgment itself. This is Commander Rex of the United Earth Federation Navy. To all hostile vessels, you came to our world uninvited. You murdered our people without cause. You laughed when we asked for peace. A pause that seemed to stretch across eternity. Now you know the price of that laughter. Throughout the Kethran fleet, alien crews listened to the human commander's words with growing terror. They had expected an easy victory over primitives. Instead, they had found themselves facing a military force that fought with precision, courage, and a determination they had never encountered before. You have one chance, Rex continued, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more threat than any shout. Leave, now. Return to your leaders and tell them what you have seen here today. The remaining Kethran ships began to power down their weapons. One by one, they started jumping to hyperspace, fleeing the battle that had gone so terribly wrong. As the last enemy ship disappeared into the dark, Rex stood alone on his bridge, surrounded by the quiet hum of victory. Around him, his crew began the work of tallying the damage and caring for the wounded. But Rex was looking beyond the tactical displays, beyond the burning wreckage that littered space, beyond even the human colony they had just saved. He was looking toward a future that had just been born in fire and determination. "Signal Fleet Command," he said to Sarah. "Tell them the message has been sent. The galaxy now knows that humanity is no longer asking for respect." Sarah nodded, understanding the full weight of what had just happened. This battle had been more than just a military victory. It had been humanity's announcement that they were ready to take their place among the stars. "And ma'am," Rex added, his pale eyes fixed on the stars beyond, "tell them to prepare for company. Something tells me we're about to get very busy." In the distance, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter, as if they too understood that something fundamental had changed in the galaxy. The age of human isolation was over. The age of human expansion had just begun. Present day, the Galactic Archive. The old alien soldier sat in silence for a long time after he finished speaking. His 4 eyes stared at the recording machine, but his mind was still in the past. Still watching human ships tear through the Kethron fleet like lightning through clouds. Vectar's claws clicked nervously on the metal table. Click, click, click. The same sound they had made 20 years ago when he watched his people's pride die in the fire of human weapons. "You want to know what happened next," he said finally. His voice was quieter now, tired from remembering. "You want to know how the galaxy changed?" The recording machine's red light blinked patiently. Waiting. Vectar stood up slowly and walked to the great window that showed the stars. Outside, ships moved between planets like tiny dots of light. Many of those ships flew the flag of humanity now, the blue and white banner that had become a symbol of hope across the galaxy. "The survivors did exactly what Commander Rex told them to do," Vectar said to the window. "We ran home. We told our leaders what we had seen. We described the human ships, their weapons, their perfect coordination in battle." He pressed one clawed hand against the cool glass, but it was not the military report that changed everything. It was something else, something our leaders did not expect to hear. Vectar turned back to face the recording device. "We told them about hope." The old soldier walked to a different wall where pictures hung in neat rows. Images of planets and people from across the galaxy. Aliens of every shape and size, all living together in peace. "You see, when we returned to Kethron Prime, we expected our leaders to declare total war against humanity. We expected them to call up every ship, every soldier, every weapon we had. We expected them to demand revenge for the Third Fleet." His voice grew softer. "Instead, they asked us a question we had never heard before. They asked, why did the humans fight so hard?" Vectar touched one of the pictures, a group of alien children playing with human children in a school on some distant world. "At first, we gave them the normal answers. The humans fought hard because they had good weapons, because they had good training, because they were defending their territory." He moved to the next picture. This one showed aliens and humans working together to build something, maybe a hospital or a school. But our leaders kept asking the same question: why? Why did human soldiers sacrifice themselves for colonies they had never seen? Why did human pilots dive into certain death to protect planets full of strangers? Why did they fight with such passion? The old alien's voice grew very quiet now. "That is when we realized the truth. The humans were not fighting for territory or resources or glory. They were fighting for an idea. The idea that weak species deserved protection. The idea that peace was worth dying for. The idea that the galaxy could be better than what it was." Vectar sat down in his chair again. His old body moved carefully like every joint hurt. Within one standard year, everything began to change. The first species to ask for human protection were the Viridians. They were small, green-skinned people who lived on 3 planets near Kethron space. For centuries, we had taken their resources, enslaved their people, used them as we pleased. His compound eyes grew distant with memory. The humans sent one ship to Viridian Prime, just one, a destroyer called the Guardian. But that single ship carried a message that echoed across the galaxy. "These people are under our protection now. Anyone who harms them answers to us." Vectar laughed, but it was not a happy sound. The Kethron Empire had a choice. Fight one human ship and risk bringing down the full fury of humanity's fleet, or let the Viridians go free. He looked directly at the recording device. "We chose to let them go. It was the first time in our history that we had ever given up conquered territory without a fight. The old soldier stood up again and walked to his desk. On it sat a small blue flower in a glass container, a gift from a human child he had once told visitors. That was just the beginning. Within 2 years, 17 more species had joined what the humans called their coalition of free worlds. Within 5 years, it was over 100. The humans offered protection to the weak, technology to the poor, and something that had been missing from the galaxy for so long we had forgotten its name. He picked up the flower and held it gently. Hope. Vectar walked back to the window. Outside, a human transport ship was docking with the space station. Through the transparent hull, he could see human families moving to new homes on distant worlds. The great empires that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years found themselves faced with a choice they had never imagined. They could continue their old ways, conquering, enslaving, taking what they wanted by force. Or they could join something new, something better. His reflection looked back at him from the dark glass. Most chose to change. The Zephyr Star Kingdom was the first of the major powers to sign a peace treaty with the Coalition. They gave up their slave worlds in exchange for human technology and protection. The Robot Collective followed 6 months later. Vectar's voice grew sad. My own people, the Kethran Empire, held out the longest. We were too proud, too set in our old ways. We kept fighting small wars, taking what we wanted from weaker species. But each time we did, human ships would appear, not to conquer us, but to stop us. He pressed both hands against the window now. It took 10 years, but eventually we learned. The galaxy had changed. The old ways of ruling through fear and strength were dying. In their place, something new was growing, something based on cooperation instead of conquest, on protecting the weak instead of devouring them. The old soldier turned back to the recording machine one final time. His 4 eyes blazed with the same mixture of respect and fear that had haunted him for 20 years. You ask me what I learned from the Battle of the Crimson Nebula. You ask me why that day changed everything. He walked slowly back to his chair and sat down. I learned that there are 2 kinds of species in this galaxy. Those who fight for what they want, and those who fight for what they believe in. The first kind can conquer worlds, build empires, rule through fear. Vectar leaned forward, his voice growing stronger. But the second kind can change everything. He gestured toward the window, toward the peaceful ships and happy families moving through space. Look around you. Look at what the galaxy has become. Hundreds of species living together in peace. Children growing up without fear of conquest. Weak worlds protected by strong ones, not devoured by them. The old soldier's voice filled with something that might have been wonder. The humans did not conquer us through superior firepower, though their weapons were beyond our understanding. They did not defeat us through better strategy, though their tactics were flawless. They conquered us through something far more powerful than any weapon. Vectar stood up one last time, assuming the formal posture his people used for speaking the most important truths. They conquered us by showing us a better way to live. His voice dropped to a whisper that seemed to echo across the vastness of space. In a galaxy where might had always made right, where the strong had always devoured the weak, they offered something we had never seen before. They offered us the choice to become better than what we had always been. The old alien bowed his head, the weight of memory and gratitude pressing down on his shoulders. And so I end my testimony as I began it, with the truth that changed everything. The truth that every child in this galaxy learns in school. The truth that protects us all from sliding back into the darkness of our past. He looked directly into the recording device one final time, his compound eyes blazing with absolute certainty. When a species learns that fighting for others is more powerful than fighting for themselves, when hope becomes their greatest weapon, when they choose mercy over conquest and protection over profit, the silence stretched across eternity. The galaxy itself holds its breath. The recording machine clicked off, but the truth remained, written in starlight across the void, carved into the hearts of a billion worlds. Humanity had not just won a war, they had taught the galaxy how to be better. And in the dark between the stars, human ships still patrolled. Still protected. Still carried the message that had changed everything. Some things are worth fighting for, and those who fight for them change the universe.